It was a typical busy Thursday morning at the airport. The usual hum of passengers rushing to their gates, the distant chatter of families and businesspeople, and the flashing signs of flight statuses dominated the space. But as Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in the political world, made her way toward her flight to Washington, D.C., something caught her eye. She had just been upgraded to first class, a small reward for her high-profile work in Congress. As she approached the gate, she noticed an elderly man standing at the counter, his face creased with lines that spoke of years, maybe even decades, of hard-earned wisdom. He wore a cap that read, "Vietnam Veteran." His demeanor was calm, but it was clear he had been waiting for a while. A flight attendant seemed to be explaining something, but there was no sense of urgency in her tone. Karoline's eyes flicked to the digital board above. Her flight was boarding now. She needed to get to her seat, but something inside her tugged. The veteran wasn't getting the attention he deserved. Without thinking, Karoline approached the desk. "Excuse me," she said with her characteristic smile. "I think there's been a mistake. I have a first-class seat, but if this gentleman needs it, I'd be happy to switch." The attendant blinked, then looked between Karoline and the veteran. "That's very kind of you, but I'm not sure we can," Karoline waved her hand dismissively. "It's fine. He's earned it more than I have." The attendant looked momentarily stunned. She hesitated for a moment, then, as if realizing this was not a situation she could easily refuse, nodded. Karoline, ever the graceful politician, flashed a winning smile and gestured to the veteran. "Sir, would you like to take my seat? It would be an honor." The veteran blinked. His eyes softened. "You sure about this, young lady?" he asked, his voice a low gravelly drawl. Without hesitation, Karoline nodded. "Absolutely." As the veteran moved toward the luxurious first-class seat, Karoline's heart swelled with pride. She had done something small, but meaningful. Or so she thought. But as she turned to make her way to coach, she couldn't shake the feeling that this act of kindness was only the beginning of something much larger. And she would soon find out just how strange and unexpected that larger would be. As Karoline squeezed into her seat in coach, she tried to settle her mind, but a lingering thought kept creeping in. Had she done the right thing? She didn't regret giving up her seat for the veteran, it was the kind of gesture she believed in, but something about the moment felt off. She shrugged it off, attributing it to nerves about her upcoming meetings in D.C. and the long flight ahead. The plane started to taxi down the runway, the familiar rumble vibrating through the cabin. Karoline glanced at her phone, checking for any updates on her schedule. Just as she was about to scroll through an email, the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and Karoline leaned back in her seat, letting the soft hum of the engines lull her into a state of near-doze. Then, something odd happened. A strange voice echoed through the cabin, amplified by the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice crackled, "we apologize for the inconvenience, but we've just received some information. We're going to need to make an unscheduled stop." Karoline's eyes shot open. The other passengers were murmuring now, exchanging confused glances. The flight attendants, who had previously been walking down the aisles, seemed equally unsettled, exchanging whispered words among themselves. Before anyone could ask questions, the plane took a sudden, sharp turn. Karoline's stomach lurched as the cabin tilted at an alarming angle, and she could hear the faint sound of emergency sirens blaring from somewhere in the distance. "What's going on?" A woman sitting next to Karoline whispered, clutching her arm. "I don't know," Karoline replied, her heart rate quickening. The flight attendants were moving quickly now, checking on passengers, but no one seemed to know what was happening. Karoline caught a glimpse of the veteran in first class, his back straight as he peered out the window, as if he had seen something that no one else had noticed. The plane jerked again, this time much more violently. The overhead compartments rattled as though they were about to burst open. Passengers gasped and braced themselves. Karoline's fingers gripped the edge of her seat as her mind raced. Then, the unthinkable happened. A loud bang reverberated through the aircraft, followed by a chilling silence. The captain's voice came back on, but this time, there was a tremor in it. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're experiencing a minor issue, but we'll be diverting to the nearest airport shortly. There's no cause for alarm." Karoline's pulse raced. Minor issue? The turbulence alone had been far from minor. She could hear the veteran's voice now, calling out to the attendants. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his tone steady and calm despite the chaos unfolding around him. The flight attendant closest to him nodded, but Karoline could see the unease in her eyes. And then, as if on cue, the lights flickered. For a moment, everything went pitch black. The darkness was suffocating. Karoline could feel her heart hammering in her chest, and the silence that followed the blackout was so heavy that it seemed to press down on her. She couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except the distant hum of the engines and the frantic whispers of other passengers. Then, the emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie, pale glow across the cabin. For a moment, Karoline didn't know whether to be relieved or more terrified. The faces of the passengers were ghostly, their eyes wide, their expressions etched with fear. The flight attendants were now rushing down the aisles, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Karoline could barely make out their hurried motions, but she could feel the tension in the air. Something was wrong, far worse than a simple mechanical issue. She glanced to her side, her eyes searching for the veteran. His seat was empty. Karoline's stomach twisted. Had he gone to the cockpit? Had he noticed something that no one else had? She had seen the way he'd been looking out the window earlier, his expression so focused, so intent. Then, as if answering her unspoken question, a voice rang out from the front of the cabin. It was the veteran's voice, sharp, commanding, but strangely calm. "Everyone, stay seated," he shouted. "Keep your seatbelts fastened and don't panic. We're going to need to be ready for anything." Karoline's eyes widened as the words registered. The veteran was taking charge, a steady authority that seemed to have instantly calmed some of the chaos in the cabin. The murmurs of passengers quieted. Even the flight attendants paused, their movements slowing as they processed the situation. Karoline's mind raced. How could he know what to do? Had he been trained in emergencies? Had he dealt with situations like this before? She knew veterans were a resourceful group, but this seemed different. She could feel the weight of his presence. He had taken control of the situation with an ease that seemed almost unnatural. Without thinking, she stood up and moved toward the front of the plane. The aisle was still cluttered with scattered personal items, dropped bags, jackets, and phones. She pushed past, her eyes scanning the cabin, trying to make sense of what was happening. When she reached the front, she saw him again. The veteran stood there, not in panic, but in complete focus, his hand on the back of a flight attendant's shoulder as he spoke in a low, calm voice. "We're going to be all right," he said, turning to Karoline as she approached. "But we need to stay alert. Something isn't right here." His words sent a chill down Karoline's spine. She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a hand, signaling for her to listen. "The plane is being diverted, but it's not just a technical issue. There's something on the ground, something they don't want us to know about." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "And if we don't stay calm, it's not going to be a smooth landing." Karoline felt her breath catch. Her mind raced. What could be happening outside? What was so critical that the pilot wouldn't tell the passengers the full story? The veteran's eyes met hers. "I gave up your seat for a reason," he said quietly, his voice carrying an eerie weight. "And now, it looks like you're going to have to play a part in this. Stay close." Karoline swallowed hard, the full realization of the situation beginning to settle over her. Something far more sinister was unfolding, and she was no longer just a bystander. She was part of it. And the worst part was, she had no idea what would happen next. Karoline's pulse quickened as the veteran's words sank in. She felt her stomach twist into knots, but her resolve solidified. Whatever was happening, she wasn't going to just sit back and let someone else take charge. The veteran had already proven his resourcefulness, but now, he was looking at her as if she, too, had a role to play. "Stay close," he repeated, his voice low but commanding. Karoline nodded, taking a deep breath as she tried to steady her nerves. She was a politician, someone used to pressure and fast decision-making, but this felt different. This wasn't a press conference or a political debate. This was real, this was life or death. The veteran turned back to the flight attendant, who was standing frozen beside him, her hands shaking. "We need to get to the cockpit," he said firmly. "Now." The flight attendant hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. I don't think we're supposed to. I don't care what you're supposed to do," the veteran cut in, his tone sharp. "We need to find out what's going on. Now." Without another word, the flight attendant reluctantly nodded and began moving toward the front of the plane. The veteran followed close behind, and Karoline, though nervous, stayed right on their heels. The cabin was still eerily silent, save for the occasional whispered conversation or muffled sob from a nervous passenger. When they reached the cockpit door, the veteran knocked firmly. No response. He knocked again, this time louder. "Captain, it's not just mechanical," he said through the door. "You need to tell us what's happening." Silence. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Karoline could feel the tension rising in her chest. Finally, a voice crackled through the intercom again. It wasn't the pilot's this time, but someone else's, a calm, controlled voice, yet it was laced with a note of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered an issue on the ground," the voice began. "We are requesting all passengers to remain in their seats with their seatbelts fastened. We'll be landing soon, but please understand that we cannot share further details at this time." Karoline's breath caught in her throat. There was something in the voice, something off. It wasn't the usual protocol. They were being deliberately kept in the dark. The veteran's expression hardened. "I knew it," he muttered under his breath. He turned to Karoline. "This isn't just a simple mechanical failure. They're hiding something from us." Before Karoline could respond, the plane gave a violent jolt, and the lights flickered once again. The calm, robotic voice on the intercom crackled out of existence, replaced by a wave of static. The plane lurched to one side, sending a ripple of gasps and shouts through the cabin. Karoline grabbed the nearest armrest as she tried to keep herself steady. The veteran's hand shot out to steady a nearby woman who had almost fallen from her seat. "Stay calm," he urged, his voice unwavering despite the chaos. "Whatever happens, we need to stay focused. I don't know how much longer we have before things get worse." Karoline looked around the cabin, her mind spinning. The sounds of panic were growing louder, and people were standing up, moving frantically toward the back of the plane. "We can't let them spread panic," the veteran muttered, his eyes sharp. "There's something bigger at play here, and if we don't keep control, it could be too late." Karoline felt a wave of determination wash over her. She wasn't just a politician in this moment, she was a leader. She had to act. They all had to act. She turned to the veteran, locking eyes with him. "What do we do?" He looked at her, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, passing across his face for the briefest moment. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold resolve. "We find out what's really going on," he said. "And we get ready. Whatever this is, we're in it together." Just as Karoline nodded, a loud explosion rocked the plane, sending everyone into a frenzy. It was no longer just a flight. It was a fight for survival. The explosion was deafening, a violent shockwave that rattled the entire plane. Karoline's body was slammed back into her seat as the cabin was filled with a harsh, ear-splitting noise. For a split second, the world seemed to stop moving, everything suspended in time. The air smelled of burned metal and ozone. Panic erupted all around her. "Stay down!" The veteran shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He grabbed Karoline by the arm, pulling her low to the floor as the plane continued to tremble from the aftershocks of the blast. The once pale emergency lights flickered on and off, casting long, eerie shadows across the plane. People screamed. The flight attendants were frantically moving up and down the aisles, trying to help where they could, but the fear in their eyes was palpable. Karoline could see it in their faces. Whatever was happening wasn't just an accident. The veteran's hand was tight on her wrist, his grip reassuring despite the chaos. "We need to get to the back," he said urgently, pointing toward the rear of the plane. "What's happening?" Karoline gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. Is it an attack?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes scanned the cabin, calculating, searching for something in the distance. "Not sure," he muttered. "But I don't think this is just a mechanical issue anymore. Someone's messing with us." Before Karoline could respond, the intercom crackled again, this time with a jagged, broken sound. "Ladies and gentlemen, the voice was distorted, static cutting in and out. Remain calm. We are deviating from course, please stay in your seats. Further instructions, soon." The transmission cut off abruptly, and the plane jolted again, this time more violently. People screamed again, their voices rising in a crescendo of panic. Karoline's mind raced. Something was wrong. Something far beyond what anyone had prepared for. She could feel it in the air, thick with tension. The veteran, however, remained focused, his eyes narrowing as if he was piecing together something no one else could see. "Stay close," he ordered again, pulling her toward the rear of the plane. "We need to find out where we're headed." The two of them moved through the aisle, which had now become a sea of terrified faces and confusion. The crew was attempting to maintain control, but Karoline could see that they were as shaken as the passengers. The flight attendants were moving with urgency, but there was no order to their movements, just pure instinct. Karoline's mind was racing. How had this all gone so wrong? What was really happening on the ground that the flight crew wasn't telling them? As they approached the back of the plane, Karoline noticed something odd, a tall figure standing near the galley, a man who seemed eerily calm compared to the others. His clothes were nondescript, but there was something about his stance that made Karoline uneasy. "Who is that?" she whispered to the veteran, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The veteran glanced toward the man, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he muttered. "But he's not supposed to be here." Before Karoline could ask more, the plane pitched again, harder this time, and the man at the back of the plane turned to face them. His eyes locked onto Karoline's, and for a split second, everything seemed to freeze. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The man's lips curled into a small, unsettling smile. And then, without warning, he turned and disappeared into the rear galley. "What the hell was that?" Karoline asked, her heart skipping a beat. The veteran's expression was grim. "We've got a bigger problem than we thought." With the sound of screams rising behind them and the plane shaking more violently with every passing moment, Karoline realized that whatever was happening, it was far more than just a malfunction. It wasn't just an attack, either. It was something coordinated, something planned. And it was unfolding right under their noses. The veteran's next words sent a chill through Karoline's bones. "We're not just in danger from the outside. There are people on this plane who are part of it." It was only then that she understood the full scope of what they were up against. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next. Karoline's heart pounded in her chest as the veteran's words sank in. There are people on this plane who are part of it. She couldn't wrap her mind around it. Who could they trust? The flight crew, the passengers, who could possibly be involved in something this sinister? The plane jolted again, throwing everyone off balance. Karoline stumbled, gripping the nearest seat for support. She glanced around the cabin, her eyes scanning the terrified faces of the other passengers. There was a palpable sense of panic now. A woman near the window was whispering frantically to her husband, while a man clutched his head in his hands, his breathing shallow. The veteran seemed unfazed by the growing chaos around them. He moved through the aisles with purpose, his eyes flicking from one face to another, assessing, calculating. He was looking for something, someone. But what? "We need to move quickly," he said, his voice low but firm. "We're not just dealing with a mechanical failure anymore. There's something else happening here." Karoline nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "What do you think is going on?" Before he could answer, the intercom crackled again, this time with a voice that sent a chill down her spine. "Attention, passengers," the voice said, slow and deliberate. "We have identified a security breach on board. Please remain calm and in your seats. Do not attempt to leave the cabin. We are taking steps to ensure your safety." "A security breach?" Karoline's pulse quickened. Her eyes widened as she looked at the veteran. "Did you hear that? What does it mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned sharply, scanning the cabin one more time before making a beeline toward the rear galley, the same place where the strange man had disappeared earlier. Karoline followed him closely, her breath coming in shallow bursts. As they approached the back of the plane, Karoline saw the man again, standing near the galley door, watching them with an unsettling calmness. His eyes were fixed on the veteran, a smirk playing on his lips. He didn't seem surprised to see them. The veteran stopped in his tracks. His eyes narrowed. "You," he said, his voice cold and hard. "What are you doing here?" The man didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his movements smooth and deliberate. "Just following orders," he said, his voice low and almost amused. "You should know by now, though. You can't stop what's already been set in motion." Karoline's stomach dropped. She took a cautious step back, but the veteran remained calm, his stance unwavering. "Orders from who?" the veteran demanded. "Who's behind this?" The man chuckled softly, as though the question was amusing to him. "That's not for you to know. You'll find out soon enough." He looked over his shoulder, glancing toward the cockpit. "But don't worry. The pilot is just following orders too. He's not in charge anymore." A sickening realization washed over Karoline. The pilot, the entire crew, they weren't in control. This plane, their lives, everything was being controlled from somewhere else. By someone else. "We need to get to the cockpit," the veteran said, his voice tight with determination. "Now." The man's smirk faltered, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something, fear? Panic? It was gone too quickly to tell. He stepped aside, allowing them to pass. But as Karoline and the veteran moved toward the cockpit, the man's voice called out, low and ominous. "You're too late," he said. "The plan is already in motion. You can't stop what's coming." Karoline glanced back, her heart pounding in her chest. What was coming? She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure, they were running out of time. The veteran reached for the cockpit door, his hand steady, his face set with grim resolve. He turned to Karoline. "Stay behind me. Don't say anything. Whatever happens, stay focused." Karoline nodded, her mind racing with questions, but she had no answers. She wasn't sure if they could still stop whatever was happening, but she was certain of one thing, whatever was on the other side of that door, they had to face it together. The veteran swung the cockpit door open with force. And the first thing Karoline saw made her blood run cold. The pilot wasn't there. The seat was empty. And there, in the captain's chair, was another figure, a man dressed in a dark suit, his back to them, staring out the window at the turbulent skies. Karoline's breath caught in her throat. "Who the hell are you?" the veteran demanded. The man turned slowly, a smile creeping onto his face, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'm the one in charge now," he said. "And you're too late to stop what's coming next." The man in the captain's seat turned fully around, his cold eyes locking onto Karoline and the veteran. He was tall, his features sharp and angular, but there was something about him that seemed off. It wasn't just the way he looked, it was the sense of control he exuded, the way he held the power of the situation in his hands as though it were an afterthought. Karoline's mind raced. There were too many questions. Who was this man? Why had the pilot disappeared? What had been set in motion, and how could they possibly stop it now? The veteran took a cautious step forward, his face hardening. You don't get to take control of this plane. Who are you, and what have you done with the real pilot? The man in the captain's seat didn't move, his fingers resting lightly on the armrest. His lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew they had already won. I am someone who understands what's truly at stake, the man said, his voice low, almost seductive in its calmness. The real question is, do you understand what's coming? You've been playing checkers while I've been playing chess. Karoline's eyes flicked to the veteran, who was now inching closer, his hands subtly resting on the edge of a nearby emergency control panel. She could see the gears turning in his mind, weighing their options. The man didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't care. He leaned back in the captain's chair, staring at them both with a mixture of amusement and disdain. You're too late, he repeated, almost as if savoring the moment. This plane has been hijacked in the most subtle way. And there's nothing you can do about it now. The veteran's eyes narrowed. Hijacked? You think this is just about the plane? The man laughed softly, but it was a hollow sound. Oh, it's not just about the plane. It never was. This is part of a much larger plan, a plan that will change everything. His eyes flicked toward the window as if seeing the future in the clouds outside. You think this is an isolated incident? It's not. The whole world is on the brink of something significant. Karoline felt a cold chill creep down her spine. She'd been in politics long enough to know that when someone started speaking like this, cryptic, vague, but with an underlying sense of certainty, it usually meant they were holding the cards. Who are you working for? Karoline asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. What is it you want? The man didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, eyes glinting with something darker now, before finally speaking again. Control, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Power over the world. Power over the decisions that are made. There are people who have been waiting for the right moment, for the right people, to fall into place. And you, he gestured toward the veteran. And you, Karoline, have just unknowingly played your part. The veteran's jaw clenched. No. You're wrong. We're not letting you do this. The man chuckled, leaning back even further in his seat. You don't have a choice. The plane is already in the air. The world's gears are already turning. Your interference won't matter. And by the time you realize it, it'll be too late. Karoline felt her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the distant sounds of screaming passengers in the background. The chaos hadn't subsided, it was growing louder. Her mind snapped into focus. This was bigger than just the plane. This was bigger than the veteran or even her. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice sharp. You're wrong. This plane may be in your hands, but we're still here. You haven't won yet. The man's eyes darkened, a flicker of rage flashing through them. But he didn't get the chance to respond. The veteran acted quickly. In a swift, practiced move, he reached into a compartment near the cockpit door, pulling out a small device. It was a high-tech signal jammer, something Karoline had seen only once before during a security briefing. The veteran had clearly been prepared for something like this, he'd expected a worst-case scenario. With a click, the device came to life. The man in the captain's chair's eyes widened as the intercom and communication systems went dead, along with the plane's GPS feed. Now, you're going to listen, the veteran said, his voice low but filled with authority. We're taking control of this plane back. Karoline stepped forward, her voice firm. And no matter what you say, we're going to stop this. The world is not going to be your pawn. For the first time, the man looked truly unsettled. He stood up from the captain's chair, his hands slightly trembling. You don't understand. There's no stopping it. The chain of events has already been set. You're too late. But the veteran was resolute, his hand gripping the emergency control panel now. It's never too late, he said quietly. Not while we still have a chance. The man backed away slowly, his face contorted with frustration. But before he could say another word, the veteran and Karoline worked in tandem, using every ounce of their political savvy, their knowledge of security protocols, and the veteran's military precision to neutralize the threat. In a matter of moments, the man was restrained, his attempts to resist futile. With the threat contained, Karoline and the veteran made their way to the cockpit, their path now clear. The pilot was found, locked in a small storage compartment, and once freed, he quickly regained control of the plane. They had won, for now. As the plane began its descent toward a nearby airport, Karoline couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. There were more questions than answers. But she knew one thing for certain, this time, they had stopped the unimaginable. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for the future after all. But she couldn't forget the final chilling words of the man in the cockpit, "You're too late." It wasn't over yet.